to get a likeness.
Yeah.
I think, you know, if you are painting people or
Yeah.
if you're painting something like very realistic, very specific, doing an underpainting or even just like having a good photo transfer is so essential.
Welcome to the Gathered Arts Podcast, where we sit down with our creative community and talk about life as artists while Lee paints a portrait of our lovely guest.
Thank you, Robyn, for coming on.
My pleasure. So nice to be here.
Do you want to give us a little intro into who you are and your practice?
Of course. So I'm a painter. I'm originally from Montreal, but I moved to Toronto initially to study graphic design and illustration at Sheridan. And then I stayed and worked in commercial art and design for about 10 years and got to painting fairly recently, about 6 years ago. And I'm a practicing oil painter and art teacher here in Toronto.
So you studied graphic design, correct?
I did.
What made you switch to a more, I guess, fine art avenue?
Yeah, so I think I've always enjoyed using traditional media. So I like to work in oil paint. I also like to work in graphite and charcoal. And I just didn't think that there was as much flexibility doing my own work when I was working in an agency or for a magazine. So yeah, I wanted to essentially paint and draw what I had in my head and and execute my own work.
Did you always find yourself being like a creative person? That's why you wanted to go into something that's more creative adjacent, at least?
Yeah. So even when I was a kid, I've always painted and drawn.
Yeah.
My dad is an architect, so I think it's kind of stemmed from that. Like there was always pencils and paper laying around our house, and I was always creatively inclined. And yeah, ever since I can remember, I've always had like a pencil or like a marker in hand and just drawing whenever I can.
Yeah. Did you find yourself like starting with drawing, or did you start with painting?
I mean, like we all start as kids, like we
Sure.
all draw with like coloring pencils, and there's other markers obviously in the house. And then I really started painting mainly in watercolor actually at first.
Wow.
And that was, I guess I was like 10, 11, 12, like around that age. You know, even in art school and elementary school, I always kind of remember, or in art class in elementary school, I always kind of remember picking up some like any sort of art material and just seeing what I could create with that.
What kind of painting do you do?
Yeah, so mostly oil painting.
Okay.
At least now. And the reason behind that is because I just love the fluidity of the media. I like how you can create kind of natural looking skin tones with it. I paint a lot of figures and people, so I really enjoy using that media to depict, portraits, figurative work. Yeah. And then incorporating some abstract elements into that too. And again, it's very flexible. So I can do the abstract parts in oil as well as the figurative parts. And it's just a material that I just really enjoy using.
Yeah. And I feel like oil is quite a traditional kind of path to go through when you are using figure or painting figures. Did you start kind of with acrylic though when you came through, and then learn acrylic first and then move to oil?
Yeah, so I did. I think when I was studying like graphic design and illustration, we definitely learned to paint in watercolor and acrylic first.
Okay.
And it was only kind of afterwards and kind of in my own gravitation towards learning kind of oil painting that I really started to explore that media both myself, and then I went to the Academy of Realist Art for a few years and I graduated from that I think about 3 years ago. It's actually now I teach there. I teach workshops. And yeah, that's where I learned to use oil paint more classically. So kind of more in a classical tradition, similar to those 16th, 17th century oil painters like Rembrandt and, even Sargent a little bit later. So yeah, and because it's such a material that is used to depict skin tones, I really gravitated towards that media more so than any other. And I still kind of enjoy painting in acrylic, and oftentimes like the base layer of my paintings I'll do in acrylic, especially if I'm like pressed for time, and if I need to get a painting kind of ready for an exhibit, then I'll paint part of it in acrylic. And then always the finishing layers are always done in oil.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like your work now at least is more abstract, like with the fluid kind of brush strokes and stuff like that. Do you start that with acrylic then? Like the brush strokes and the figure?
No, so actually the acrylic is mostly for, like, I'll do a gesso layer in acrylic gesso on my, because now I'll paint more often on like wooden panel. So I'll coat that layer in like an acrylic gesso, and then I'll do kind of the base color of the whole painting in an acrylic layer. So I'll kind of color match my reference photo in acrylic sort of first. And then what I'll do is the more fluid brush strokes, I'll normally do that in oil. And what I'll do is I'll mix some either oil media or some mineral spirits, some paint thinner into the paints in order to get that fluidity to the brush stroke.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of oils do you use for that?
Yeah, just traditional oil painting. So I don't use the water soluble ones. I find those have like a little bit more of a tacky quality to it.
I haven't used them yet, but I keep hearing that.
Yeah, and I really enjoy just the traditional media, and especially because to me they're very archival, right? They've been time tested. Like, especially most of the earth tones are made with all kind of natural pigments, right? All clays and minerals, so they really come from the earth. And so I think just how archival it is first and foremost, and also because that's how I was classically trained in oil paint, right? So I think I just gravitate towards that too.
Nice.
Yeah.
With painting skin tones, is there like a set palette that you use, or is it from scratch every single time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll typically have a few colors that I'll always use, right? Okay. Oftentimes, I don't know if you guys know what the Zorn palette is, but it's sort of these 4 colors that is named after this 20th century or 19th century painter Anders Zorn from Sweden. And so his palette was titanium white, yellow ochre light, cadmium red, and then black. So basically the black acts like a blue, and it's sort of like you have white and all of these primary colors, right? So you got your yellow, you got your red, and you got your blue. And so that's like a good way to start out. And what's nice about that is you can use basically those 4 colors to paint everything. And because the value range is so large, right? You're going from titanium white all the way to lamp black or to ivory black. Like you can kind of create every single value in between. So normally you can get about like 80% there just with that palette, especially if you're just painting skin tones.
Right.
So I find that like really fascinating. And so I'll usually always have titanium white, cadmium red, and like some sort of black on my palette. And then I'll like replace those, like maybe the yellow ochre. I kind of prefer to use like the oxides because they have more of a transparent quality. So I'll have like maybe yellow oxide, red oxide, brown oxide on my palette to give me more of those earthy tones. And then, you know, if there's a special like lighting effect, for example, like in the current painting that I'm doing right now, I'm using quinacridone pink or quinacridone magenta.
Like that name.
Yeah. I think I'm pronouncing it right.
I think I know what one you're talking about. Yeah.
And it's kind of this like more vibrant pink color. And they also have like a sort of a violet in that same, using that same sort of type of pigment. It is synthetic. And it's one of the few synthetic colors I actually use on my palette. And obviously it depends on the painting that I'm using, but that has more of a pinky quality to it than maybe the red, which, or the cadmium red tends to have a little bit more of an orangey kind of look to it. So so I'll be a little bit flexible, but usually I'll have maybe the same 4 or 5 colors that are consistent throughout my pieces.
You have like a core that you always go back to.
Exactly. Yeah. And especially in terms of a value range, like I'll always have black and I'll always have white.
Yeah.
And then all the colors in between, I think it depends on whoever's flesh I'm painting, right?
Right. Does that also depend on like the skin tone of the figure?
Definitely. The skin tone and lighting conditions.
Okay.
So I think the lighting conditions probably even more so because I feel for most people, you have like similar skin tones. I mean, maybe some people
like
have
undertones,
maybe a greenish undertone. Some people have yellow undertones. Some people have like pink or red undertones. So that does vary a bit. But mainly it's like the proportion of those, right? Like how much green are you putting in comparison to red? So it's a slight variation. It's not even a huge extreme in that part. Yeah.
Yeah. I find it so interesting that you include black in your palette because I just remember you always mix your own black because it kind of muddies everything. Yeah. Is that something you were taught or something that you teach at your workshops?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's like a big point of contention for a lot of painters. all of the Renaissance painters use black, right? And they called it bone black, right? Because it was made from ivory, it was made from tusks, and that's kind of like what you, to get that pigment, you just basically burnt ivory, right? And so they called it bone black. So all of the Renaissance painters always use black. And if you look from Rembrandt to even some of the medieval painters, they also use bone black. It was really only when the Impressionist painters started painting and they wanted more of this chromatic, vibrant feel to their paintings that they decided to abandon black in favor of using kind of dark blues to get more of that chroma, get more of that saturation of color. But that being said, like you can also mix your own black. So there's different ways of doing that. You can kind of, a nice way to do that is like mix like sap green and alizarin. That creates a nice black. You can mix like sort of raw umber and ultramarine blue. That makes a nice black. So there are ways of creating black for sure without actually using the black from the tube. But I think one of the reasons too that they do that is so students don't just rely on using black to darken things, right?
Yeah.
Like it's sometimes better if you want to get a more chromatic, more realistic skin tone, if you use less of black and maybe more of a complementary color to soften it or make it more gray or darken it. So yeah, I think there's ways of approaching your palette that I think it's dependent on you and maybe your level of painting. But even in my workshops, I'll always encourage students to use black, but that's possibly because I teach more in like a classical tradition, right? Although I'm actually teaching 2 Impressionist painting workshops soon.
That's exciting.
And I think so the one in June actually is going to be on
soon.
Monet and the Impressionists.
Ooh, nice.
So I'm teaching a workshop at the Academy of Realist Art then. And I believe in that, in the colors that I've asked the workshop attendees to buy, I did not include black on it. So there's because it's an Impressionist workshop, right? So you have to almost take a look to see, you know, what color palettes they ended up using. And I'm trying to stay as true as possible to their aesthetic and their color choices.
Right. And is this kind of everything that you've learned through the academy, or is this stuff that you've looked up on your own and kind of like explored on your own?
Yeah. So I think for the Impressionist stuff specifically, that was stuff that I've researched on my own.
Okay.
You know, that being said, a lot of the Impressionists had classical realist training. So like Monet definitely painted very classically at the beginning of his career and got more and more abstract and impressionistic towards the end, right? So there is that sort of classical basis to a lot of Impressionist painting, which I did learn the majority of at the Academy of Realist Art. But I'm like such an art history nerd, and I love reading and researching, especially about Impressionist painters and their process and what colors they used and how they painted and where they painted. So to me, it was a lot of research myself and, you know, YouTube videos, books, podcasts, and sort of this compilation of all of this information that I've gotten from different sources. Yeah.
I want to ask you a bit about being a teacher.
Sure.
Yeah, we were talking about this a bit earlier before, but how do you find the balance of being an artist yourself and also teaching it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I love teaching. I think it's really fun and interesting to me, and actually makes me sort of question my own artistic practices. I mean, the students that I teach, they typically have a lot of artistic training already. So they're asking me some hard questions sometimes about, you know, what pigments to use and why, and how I'm painting or how to approach a painting, right? In not only a technical way, but maybe like a philosophical way too. So it does make me reflect on my own artistic practice. And, you know, we're always talking about new materials that they've found and, different techniques. And it's just, it feels to me a lot of the time just talking to my friends about art, and which is great, and getting paid for it. So I really enjoy it. I think, you know, the more we can talk about art in kind of a more relaxed environment too. And I think that's kind of what the world needs right now is, you know, more enjoyment around the arts, right?
Yeah. And I feel like it's a lot more approachable when it's something where like you can really engage with the teacher and not feel so like isolated.
Yeah. I mean, I try to, I think I'm a nice teacher, hopefully. You are. Yeah. I try not to get too angry when people don't listen or make mistakes. No, I really enjoy the process and the teaching. So yeah, it's definitely fun for me.
Yeah. Did you start by teaching at the academy, or did you right away teach at your studio?
I think I taught at the academy first. I think what happened is after I graduated, there were a few of my students just approached me asking if I was open to teaching them. So that's kind of how I got started in teaching. It wasn't necessarily a conscious decision. It was something I kind of did to supplement my income selling paintings, right? But then I realized I just really enjoyed it, and I continued doing it, and now I'm more actively doing workshops, especially at the Academy of Realist Art. I also do, like, I teach some workshops like for arts clubs, or I'll do demos in the city, and and that's also been really fun. I just get to meet more artists and talk about my process a little bit. Or I just did a demo recently of like John Singer Sargent and his painting techniques, and so I did a 2-hour like demo of his self-portrait and just talked about his color palette and the way that he painted and the types of brushes he used as well. So that's been fun for me too, right?
Yeah.
So what has been your experience with running your own studio?
Yeah. I mean, it's been great. It's always challenging. Like, being an artist is like running your own business, right? So once I got my own studio, which is, I've had it for about a year now, and it's fantastic. And I have a lot of students over for like private lessons, and then I'll do workshops in my studio. So they're a little bit more intimate than the ones that I teach at the Academy of Realist Art. They're mostly 2 days, and I limit it to 4 students. So for those weekend workshops, it ends up being really fun, and we all get to really know each other by the end of it because we're in so close proximity to each other, which is great. And and then I paint there every day almost. I'll usually go in the morning, usually 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, paint for a few hours, and do some teaching in the afternoon. So it's kind of my schedule. But no, I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. It's great running my own studio space, and it's always nice to have that flexibility in my schedule. But it's really allowed me to focus too on my own work and keep consistent lighting conditions and be able to take good photos and videos of my work as well. So no, I wouldn't change it.
Yeah. Where were you working out of before you had your studio?
Yeah, so I was working under the Academy of Realist Art for a bit, and that was just a really long commute. And then I was sharing a studio space with a few other artists, and that just became a little too crowded. So it was kind of the time for me to actually get my own space, because I was doing more and larger pieces, and I was doing a lot more teaching. So having that dedicated space for it is absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Do you ever miss having that more collaborative space? Because I feel like as an artist, it can be kind of isolating, but also, I don't know. How is it like being alone versus with other artists in the space?
Yeah. So there is one other artist in the back room that I do rent it out to. So that's been nice, having somebody who comes in and out of the studio space. But because I often teach at the Academy of Realist Art, because I have models come over to shoot, because I have workshops, I don't feel lonely at all.
Right.
I kind of like, and obviously being a painter, I do like my alone time, especially when it comes to the creative process. It's so much easier to focus when I'm doing that on my own. But no, I mean, even, Toronto has a great art community as well. And, knowing you guys and knowing other people who are, artists living and working in the city, who have gallery openings, I think that allows me to get that creative energy that I need in order to, then go back to my studio and continue creating work alone. Yeah.
Do you live in your studio, or is it a separate space?
It's a completely separate space.
Oh, okay.
But I walk to my studio, which is fantastic.
That's so nice.
So it's like a 3 blocks away from my apartment.
Did you do that on purpose after like the commute to the academy?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's just, even the ability to go to my studio in the evening, because sometimes I'll go back around 6 or 7 o'clock at night and work until late. So it gives me that flexibility to always be able to walk over and to continue painting if I want to.
Yeah. You sound really busy. How is this like work-life balance? Because I know you have a partner or a husband. So do you find yourself having to kind of pull yourself away from the art and set aside time for him? Yeah, so we're both busy. Okay. So he works as a tenant organizer. So he's taking meetings pretty late in the evening as well. So we both kind of operate on very similar schedules. And what's nice though is because he works from home and the studio's so close to my apartment, we like have lunch together sometimes. Nice. And we make time like in the middle of the day sometimes for each other, or go on long walks. But for me, it's, I think we're both really devoted to what we do. And, we're lucky we don't have kids that we have to take care of. We don't have sort of other like obligations that require us to take us away from our work. So we both work really long hours as a result. You just both understand each other. We both understand each other. And I think it's always important to have like partners, especially in like for artists especially, that understand that the creative process isn't like a linear thing that takes up only a certain amount of time, right? It's you need to have that flexibility to pursue it more professionally, right? It takes up your whole life. It's all consuming. Has having that separate space been a lot easier, I guess, on your mental health to kind of separate work versus life? So I think I've always, I mean, apart from like a couple months here and there when I was transitioning from like going from one studio space to another, I've always wanted to have a separate space to do creative work. It was actually really tough for me during the pandemic when I was also like working an agency job to work from home for so long and be on Zoom. And so that took a lot out of me. That was really, really draining. And I think at that point in time is when I decided to dive into the painting almost full time and make a career out of that instead. I need that separation between my home and my work, for my mental health. And I just feel more productive when I come into my studio and I'm wearing my artist hat exactly. in that way, and being able to create in my own space that I don't have to continue changing just because of my living situation, right? Could you talk a bit more about that transition from like the corporate agency to full-time artist? Sure. So I was working like as a corporate art director and graphic designer for about 10 plus years. Wow. And I really enjoyed it. I had some great jobs and I learned a ton, especially around, marketing and social media. And, I did everything from creating logos and business cards and illustrations, books. I worked like in a lot of luxury sectors too. So I did work in some like with a lot of like real estate developers, branding like condos and new developments. And then I worked in fashion magazines. I did work with a lot of banks and venture capital firms. So that was also really interesting. But I think that the culmination of all those experiences are what I think it enables me to take on more and do more in my own artistic practice too. Like I feel like right now I'm really good at structuring my day and kind of finding these bits of time to be more productive in my studio practice. So I think in that way, it's, I have no regrets. Like, yes, I kind of came to practicing my fine art a little bit later, but I think it's the culmination of all my experiences too. And being an artist in this day and age, like you have to know social media, you have to be able to edit your photos properly. And I think I was like kind of a fish in water when it came to doing all that for my art practice, because I already had all of this experience doing that for my commercial art practice, right? So that was actually really, I found that really great. But obviously
would I have painted maybe something different had I started right out of art school? Possibly. But I think also being an artist, you're drawing upon all of your past experiences too. And I don't think I would be creating the same art that I am now if I just was doing it right out of art school.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a path, and it's
of course
reflecting on like your life experiences and, everything you've been through. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Did the inspiration for your graphic design work also inspire like how you work with fine art?
Definitely. Yeah. I think my process is very structured.
Okay.
And I think even the types of things that I paint, like I love painting people, and often the work, especially that I did for the fashion industry, it was, centered around models and what they wore,
that's true.
And the photography behind that. So, having worked with a lot of really talented photographers, having worked in those types of industries, I think it definitely had an influence on how I not only photograph my subjects, photograph my especially women, right? Obviously younger women. And I do that because, I am a woman myself, and I feel like I relate to my subject matter more. And oftentimes the people that I invite to pose for me are friends or friends of friends. So to have that community and to photograph and represent people that I know is really important to me. But yeah, that definitely stems from my commercial creative practice. And I even think that, I have strong silhouettes in my work. I deal a lot with very precise color application in my work, and all of that, is what you have to do as a graphic designer too. So yeah, I think there's a lot of crossover between both my graphic design work and my current artistic practice.
Yeah. How do you choose your models?
So either like I'll approach friends or family or friends of friends. Sometimes I'll just put out open calls on my Instagram, and then I have people who reach out to me saying that they would love to be a model, and I'll go and take a few photographs of them, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But for the most part, I mean, I'm lucky to have friends who not only like want to pose for me, but are great at posing, and who I really enjoy working with. So it can come from wherever. I could possibly see, maybe having drinks with somebody, and then I'll see sort of an expression. I was like, oh, okay, that's really interesting to me. Would you be interested in coming to my studio? And I'll take a few photographs, and we'll see what we can create from those. So
So it's really just stemming from that kind of like relationship that you have with the person that you feel kind of inspired by.
Yeah, exactly. And for those people who I don't maybe know as well, who reach out to me on Instagram, it's, I'll look at their either artistic practice. A lot of them are either actors or models or artists themselves. So they have an understanding of that creative process too. And I feel that like if I identify with them and their art, then definitely I will invite them to come and, pose for me. So if anybody wants to to be painted, let me know. And I'll reach out to you.
Do you take on commissions that way as well?
All the time.
Okay.
So I think last year I did about 5 or 6 commissions, and it is mostly portraiture. So I love doing commissions. It is, just working with another person and their creative vision. And oftentimes, my work it's very specific. So they're coming to me with that vision of either like one of my previous pieces that they've seen that they've really loved, or a specific color palette. And I mean, it's very similar to doing like a commission for graphic design or illustration, right? And so I really love working with people who commission me and seeing how we can kind of come together. And obviously I definitely want to, I have my ideas of how the piece can come together, but I really like feeding off of these restrictions that my client or my commissioner kind of gives to me as well.
That's such a unique perspective. I feel like people feel like there's so much pressure on commissions to actually follow through on everything and stick to these really rigid guidelines.
But I love guidelines. I think the challenge then is how are you going to be creative within these restrictions?
I like
and sometimes you end up thinking of things you didn't or initially
that's true.
because of those restrictions that you're given, right? So it's I don't view it as something negative. I view it completely as a positive, and working with somebody else to execute our collective creative vision is something I enjoy doing, definitely.
Yeah. With these paintings, are you usually trying to capture like a feeling or an emotion, or are there like poses that I guess are more dynamic that you lean towards? Yeah.
So I think in my own personal work, not necessarily the commission work that I do, because like I sort of said, those are often more portraits, straight portraits. But in my figurative work, I don't necessarily want people to view them as portraits. I want for people to look at them and kind of get a feeling, either some sort of emotion or some sort of response to like a color palette. Oftentimes when people view art, they're bringing in their whole past experience and their own aesthetic and views into that viewing experience, right? So I'm not trying to communicate necessarily something like extremely specific that, oh, I want you to feel happy when you look at this.
Yeah.
I think the pieces that I create are always stem from like an emotional place that I'm at, and you know, I'm very affected by weather and colors and the visual media that I'm consuming too. So a lot of that goes into my pieces. But what I want to is to reflect sometimes the person that I am painting and put a little bit of them in the painting as well, and sort of have this collaborative creation that stems from my models too. So it's a little bit of a give and take. But normally whenever I hire or get a model to pose for me, I'll have a very specific, like I'll create a mood board. I have specific poses in mind. Like it is all very specific. It's very intentional. And I think that intentionality when creating it, even though you might like veer in certain directions afterwards, I think having that intentionality is so important, because you want to create a sort of a specific type of expression from that painting, right?
It's like, again, with the guidelines, you have somewhere to start, and then you kind of see where it takes you. And honestly, having those guidelines too allow me to be like to start the painting in a pretty structured way too, and not to overthink things, right? Because I think what a lot of artists tend to do, and I see this in my students all the time, is they'll stall on a project because they're really not sure how to even start executing it. And I think having those guidelines in place, you know, for you, for your clients, for any type of work that you're doing is really important, because it gives you a jumping off point, right? For creating your own work.
Yeah, it's almost like reassuring in ways. Yeah,
definitely.
Do you ever have to deal with that kind of mentality that you said your students have sometimes, where there's like this pressure inside of your head to like create that perfect image?
I mean, I think all artists feel that way. Yes, I think there is that pressure, but I've painted hundreds of paintings at this point, and it's gotten to the point where I'm showing up in my studio and I just start mixing my colors right away, and you just kind of have to start and work through some of the insecurities you may or may not be feeling at the time, right? And I'm very much of the mindset too, and this might stem from my commercial art background, because we weren't given the luxury of time when we were pressed for a deadline or had a client presentation, right? So I think going in and working through your thought process by applying paint to your canvas is so important, and just allows you to actively think of how you're creating, right?
Do you find that getting students to like start the underpainting and do that process first before the actual painting is helpful for people who are struggling with starting?
Definitely, to get a likeness. I think, if you are painting people, or if you're painting something like very realistic, very specific, doing an underpainting, or even just like having a good photo transfer is so essential. And I'm not one to like criticize people for using like projectors or transfers. I think that's, part of the contemporary artistic practice, right?
It's a tool.
It's a tool to use. Yeah. And, the Renaissance painters used a camera obscura. So, people were doing this forever. But I think that being accurate when it comes to that, like a representational painting, and especially for a classical or realistic painting, is so important because part of that artistic expression is capturing that person's likeness, right?
Yeah.
So definitely doing an underpainting is important when you want to be so specific. But, a lot of the process that I teach and do is called alla prima, which means it's more direct painting, right? And you're trying to do a whole figure all in one go.
Yeah.
As
Alla
opposed to
prima
building
is
it sort of translates loosely to like the first, right?
Yeah.
So doing everything like in one shot,
yeah.
right?
It's like wet on wet.
It's like
basically.
Like you're painting into wet.
Yeah.
Because it's on a dry canvas, so it's not like watercolor. Like you're wetting the media, or you're wetting the paper, and then you're applying the wet paint on top of it. It's more like you're starting off with a blank canvas, and you're just kind of creating the whole painting in one shot, right?
Yeah.
Which is I find it's really fun. It's something that I do often for my workshops, and how a lot of impressionist painters like, John Singer Sargent, he was a fan of doing that for both of his portrait paintings as well as his landscape paintings. And, Zorn did that as well. So, an underpainting's great. It's important when you're doing very classical work or doing work where you're not sort of sure of how to structure your painting. I think that's so important, or at least doing some sketches. Like, I'll always plan out my painting and maybe do a little color study before actually executing it, just because it gives you a guideline, right?
Yeah, that structure.
Going back to that whole idea of structure and guidelines, like it does give you a reference for what you imagine the final work could be. So however you enjoy doing it, whatever your process is, like kind of choose your own adventure when you're starting a painting. But the most important thing is just working through your creative vision and putting that to paper, right?
Yeah, that's the hardest part.
It's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Oh, I like it so far. My chin's a little big.
Robyn the teacher.
Oh, sorry, I know. I'm just gonna shut up. Thank you. Oh my God, this is amazing.
So we have a mini game for you.
Okay.
Kat, if you'd like to get our little props. We want to test your color matching skills. Okay. I have some chipped nail polish here that you can, I guess, cover the design and try to match the base color.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. I'll get started.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take out some of the white.
Which one are you going to do first?
Maybe I'll do that blue one first, and then I'll do the pink. So I'm just going to kind of lay out all my colors. And how I like to do this is lay it out from lightest to darkest. So it's more of a dark blue that we got going on. So actually, it's probably more of a blackish blue that we have. So I'm not even going to use blue on that. I'm just going to use black.
Ooh.
I know.
Is it like specific blacks that you're looking for?
Lamp black is actually the coolest black.
Okay.
So you'll notice that when you mix the white in it, it actually, you can do that now. You mix the white with the black. It has this cool note.
Right. Yeah.
That is going to be really, really close already.
Yeah, it really is.
Nail polish.
Wow, mixing blue with no blue is crazy.
This is like the Zorn palette that I was talking about before, right? Just having a couple different colors can really go far. I mean, already
that was
very
quick.
close. I'm going to put in a little bit of this French ultramarine blue because I think it has to be just the slightest bit more chromatic. So.
When you say chromatic, what exactly does that mean?
It means more saturated. So it's a kind of a brighter color. Chroma is one of 3 dimensions to color. So whenever you're looking at color, you should always ask, is the value right? Is the chroma right? And is the hue right? Right? So the hue is the actual color. Is it green? Is it blue? Is it red? The chroma is the intensity of color. So is it more gray? Is it more vibrant? And then the value is how dark and light the color is. So those are kind of the three main dimensions you should be looking at when evaluating a color. I mean, we're pretty close there. Mm-hmm. So here we go.
Whoa, looks good.
So
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's really close.
Wow.
Okay, so there's the blue.
Lovely.
Now we're going to mix this pink, which is actually really close.
Okay.
So
it's
like
like
it just
a
needs
coral
more
almost.
white
Yeah.
to it. And also, when you're mixing color, you should always mix quite a bit and mix it well so that all the color is kind of consistent. Right?
Yeah, you're really doing this like push and then move around, where I see a lot of people doing that like that. Exactly.
Yeah, you really want to get that color in there. How are we doing? Pretty freaking close. I think we need a little blue in there actually. Ooh. So I'm going to take a little of this blue. It needs to just cool off ever so slightly. And this will make it less chromatic, right? Less bright. So it'll dull and neutralize the color a bit, which I think will bring us towards a closer color.
Is mixing with a palette knife usually for big amounts? Or is it you're just always supposed to mix with a palette knife?
I think it's always easier to mix color and get an accurate color with a palette knife. I think if you're just pushing the color a little bit in one direction or another, you can get away with using your brush.
Yeah.
And it depends on like where you are too. If you're painting outside, I'll tend to just mix with a brush because it's just faster. But whenever you're painting more accurate skin tones, it does get, maybe a little bit pinker actually. It does really make a difference to do it with a palette knife. Because again, you can see the color a little bit better and be a little bit more accurate with that. Yeah, it's pretty freaking close. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna put some color on there.
Ooh.
A nice little blob.
Yeah.
And now we're
That's definitely it.
and now we're gonna do the red. So the red's gonna be pretty easy because it's very chromatic. I'm gonna use some of this cadmium red. It's more of this like, or maybe I'll use some alizarin actually too, because the alizarin has a darker, it's kind of a darker red to it. And also laying out your palette from darkest to lightest is always helpful because it just allows you to see your values in a little bit more of an accurate way. So yeah, so I think it's almost gonna be a mix of these two colors.
Is alizarin just like red and black, or is it a whole different pigment?
No, it's a different pigment altogether. And you'll notice that alizarin tends to be more transparent than your black. So it's actually really good for doing shadows. It's kind of like a dark, intense red. And even like, it's good to actually mix your alizarin into your black sometimes, because then you get that really kind of chromatic, dark version of the black.
Yeah.
And you'll notice too that cadmium red has a high, what's called tinting strength. So anytime that you mix cadmium red in other colors, it kind of overpowers it. So you can use almost have to use like a really, really little amount.
Is that because it's so like strong? It's not as transparent as the other paints?
It probably has something to do with transparency, but I think it's also just the, maybe the chemicals in the paint.
Okay.
I think cadmium, for whatever reason, is just very high in terms of tinting strength.
Yeah.
How are we there? That's pretty close. So let's just put that on there.
Yeah, that's close.
Yeah. And then maybe a little bit
I think it's the same one, right?
Yeah, the pointer and the pinky
and
are
the pinky
same.
is the same. Yeah, it almost looks, because of the way that the light is hitting it, it almost looks a little lighter in there. So I'm actually going to push it more to this like lighter cadmium color. I think this is going to be closer.
Ooh, I think you're right. Like maybe they are different.
So there we go.
Nice. I think you did a stellar job. That
Yeah.
looks so good.
Yeah, that's like spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on for your nail polish.
Yeah, I'm going to just smear it over.
Yeah.
Close up.
I love it.
Robyn, is there like a movement or just even material right now that you just absolutely hate and you just cannot fuck with?
Movement. Maybe AI art.
Oh, okay.
I think a lot of traditional artists can get on board with that.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I see AI as a tool that artists can use, but I think that like relying too much on AI art, like you're no longer creating anymore. Like you're not necessarily in control of your material. You're not like, it's not intentional anymore.
Yeah.
Right. You're kind of relying on the machine to do that creative thinking, and it's not even creative. So like, what are we even doing? I don't know. That's my my hot take on that.
Yeah. Is it primarily because you don't really have that like human interaction with it, or is it also like, I guess, what's behind the AI?
I think for me, it's more about like, what are we even doing? Like,
why?
Like,
Yeah.
I think like art should be about creative expression. And when you're relying on a machine to execute something creative when it's not even that, then why are we even doing that? Like, what's the point? Right?
Yeah.
And I want to see, like, in the artwork that I love, I want to see part of that artist in there. I want to see like their interpretation of the subject in it. I think that's what makes it so interesting, is because it really kind of isolates the thought processes of this individual and like creates this new type of content that you know is very personal, right, to that specific person. So I don't know. I think AI art, again, artists can use that as a tool to maybe lay out compositions or to figure out some color palettes. But as far as like relying too heavily on that tool for creation, I think it's pointless.
Yeah. Where do you think that line is where you start relying too heavily on AI?
Yeah, I think when the artist isn't present in the work, right? When you're not making any like creative decisions.
Yeah. You're just putting in the input, and then what it
like turns out.
That's the word to use.
Yeah.
What it turns out. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's probably, it is a fine line. And I think it depends on your interpretation of art and what art is. And then this brings us to a whole philosophical discussion about art and purpose and life. So it's a rabbit hole that we can go down. But as far as a mode of creative expression, I don't think AI is that at all.
Yeah.
Right?
I feel like they've been really pushing it. Like, it's shown up in Photoshop now. It's like on Instagram. How do you feel about it? I guess all those corporations kind of like trying to push us into that direction.
I mean, like, there are useful ways in which like those types of tools, again, could be useful to graphic designers, to artists. I think my take is that it shouldn't be relied on so heavily. Like, yeah, okay, we have the technology for it. Let's use it as a way of enabling our personal creative expression and not relying on it as a mode of creative expression in and of itself. So, yeah, but I think that line is changing so much, and there's so many tools out there now. And I mean, it is a lot to ask for painters to also post on social media, to also create their own websites, to also create their own branding and design. So I could see that as a way of bridging the gap between kind of marketing yourself as an artist versus using those tools to create your own expressive work. But yeah, I don't think it should be leaned on nearly as much as, all the tech bros are pushing on us.
Call them out. Really. Do you feel like it's really a big issue in the art world, or more corporations kind of taking it to a next level, taking advantage of it?
I mean, I think the two are so intertwined, right? I think there's a lot of corporations that support fine art and buy fine art.
That is true.
And that's an issue, right? Like a lot of curators or a lot of, banks now have huge art collections. That line between fine art and, I guess, and AI is becoming so blurred that it is, I think we just have to rely on the arbiters of taste in our society and who's actually doing the purchasing of all of these pieces, and kind of or not only purchasing, but kind of giving the funds to support the arts, right? I think we have to take a broader look on those types of things in society and ask ourselves, okay, like who's doing this kind of curation, who's supporting the arts, and is this the way that we want to take the future of, fine art moving forward? Is this what we want in society? I think those are obviously broader questions. And I don't think they're not easy to answer, and I think different people have different views. But yeah, it's not so clear cut.
What do you think the worst part of being an artist is, if there is one?
Yeah, I think it's the constant promotion. I think coming from a marketing background too, I was sort of hoping that, doing fine art would take me away from a lot of the branding and the promotion.
You're so wrong.
And it's even worse because you're doing all of that just for yourself, right? So I think that, I wouldn't say it's the worst part. Granted, I sort of said before, it does come easier for me than it does for others. I think part of it too is actually what I dislike most is talking about my work or having to write artist statements. I think a lot of the work that I create as a visual media, it should be interpreted by the people who are viewing it. And you're not asking writers to illustrate their book, but yet you're asking visual artists to explain their paintings. And so I think that there's something maybe weird or fundamentally wrong about that, because art should exist in the world, or fine art and paintings and sculptures and any type of visual media should exist in the world, sometimes alone without needing a full explanation for it. And and having putting that burden on the artist to explain their work, especially in the context of society and themselves and their broader creative practice. I think we've all gotten to the point where we're somewhat okay talking about it, but I don't think that artists should be pressured to actually have to speak too much about their work in such a formal context. Right?
I do feel like it's very much like a boundary or almost gatekeeping in a way. It's a lack of access for a lot of people, because if you didn't go to school or art school, you didn't get this vocabulary to use to talk about art. And you learn that through critique, reading essays and articles and all this. So it is very much an accessibility issue.
For sure. I think it's intentional that the jargon that our curators and everyone uses is inaccessible, because it does create this if you know kind of thing. And I don't know. It's I guess there has to be some way of evaluating or talking about work in a way, using a very specific language. But I think when that language doesn't even become accessible to the public, then again, what are we doing? What's the purpose, right?
I also feel like it's so different when you're creating this vocabulary or these words, and then you're applying it to the painting rather than using that kind of mindset and ideas to make the painting. It's not actually in the work, you're just trying to find it. Right.
And it's funny because a lot of fine artists that I talk to have a very basic way of talking to themselves about their own work. I want to create this bluish greenish color of the background, but mixing in this kind of weird face. And it's never oftentimes it's never so literary, or the vocabulary is never so complex during that creation process. Notes to yourself are always very use a basic language, right?
Yeah, very much.
And then sort of putting on this air when you're showing all the work in public. It just seems so fake to me.
Yeah.
And yet everyone does it. And it's part of the process, right? Everyone has to do it. But it's something that I don't particularly enjoy, but have accepted.
I feel like sometimes that like over explanation of like what a painting means kind of will alter how the audience can view your work like organically, like you're kind of giving them the answer right away. You kind of miss that whole section of where they can kind of come to their own conclusion.
Of course. I think it should be like a discovery process for them too. And I want different people to take away different things from my work. I don't want, you know, every person who looks at a painting to be like, this just makes me happy, and then walk away. And, you know? So I think, I think that by not having this blurb right next to your painting is great, because that allows people to more actively engage with your work and try to draw different conclusions from it or kind of experience different things from it, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of the same thing that's happening with not putting labels beside pieces. That way you don't have that like title associated with the work, so you can just come in fresh.
I love that.
Yeah, there's mixed emotions to that, though, for sure. Some people hate it, some people love it.
Yeah, I don't know about, I mean, even titles, like, do we need a title? Why can't we just name all our paintings Untitled? I guess that would be like an archival issue.
Just number them, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that'd be easy for keeping track of all of the paintings, right? Like, you have number 200.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So many paintings.
Yeah, I remember like back when I was in art school, when I had to title something, I tried to be like so deep and like angsty, and like by the time I figured out what the title was, it had nothing to do with what I did, because I was just like trying to find some deep meaning to like make it feel like deeper.
Yeah. And that's another, I mean, I think we've all done that at some point in our, especially early artistic career, right? And there's always like trends with titles.
Yeah.
Have you found that?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, ever since like Damien Hirst named that shark, that, I don't know, that shark piece.
It was the floating shark?
The floating shark in formaldehyde.
Yeah. What was that called?
Yeah. Something about like the nature of human existence.
Or something. Something really pretentious.
Pretentious. Like, what are we doing in this world? I think there's been a trend for artists to name their paintings like a longer, more philosophical thing, and it's never just like one word anymore. It's, you know, it has to be this like thought-provoking artistic statement for it to have any sort of like cultural relevance or whatever. But I don't know. Yeah,
I feel like that'd be really funny if it was just like a really simple and like, I don't know, playful piece to have something so philosophical. I don't know, just the dichotomy between the two.
And that's like part of the artistic piece, right? It's like having a playful name or like a very serious name to go for a very playful painting. But I think that's fun to me. Like that seems like a little tongue in cheek. It's not like so serious, right?
Yeah.
And I like when like artists have a sense of play with their work. I think that becomes interesting to me. But and I guess, you know, with this Damien Hirst piece, like, you know, obviously that brought him a ton of fame and wealth and stuff. So he's definitely doing something right. But I think it's more of a trend with naming paintings or pieces of art a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a woman, I know this is like a weird jump off, but like you just saying, talking about Damien Hirst and his success, how do you find like navigating the art world as a woman and like being in these gallery spaces that are often outselling men, and it's just a hard kind of dichotomy, for a hard mix between the two?
Of course. I think like women definitely have it worse in the art world or in a lot of other industries too. I think there's, you know, most of the high selling artists throughout history have always been men. So I think we just have to work harder and more and be more confident in ourselves and just try to push our work more to get that same recognition and value to our work. And there's organizations that are doing their part in sort of evening out that playing field. And to be honest, like most of my favorite painters are women, right? Like Jenny Savile's having a big show in London very soon. And I mean, her work is incredible. And, you know, Marina Abramović obviously is so well regarded as a performance artist in the world. And I think, you know, Cindy Sherman some of my favorite photographs, right? So it's not to say that there's no representation or there's no great female artists. I think there are. I think there just needs to be more opportunity, and collectors have to, or people who issue grants have to recognize that there's sort of this gap between the male artists that are getting that type of recognition and the female artists that are. So I mean, it's so hard because I never like referring to myself as a female artist. I think similar to actors, they're not actresses anymore. They're just actors, right? And, artists are not female artists. We're just artists. So trying to remove that language sometimes is helpful. But, the undercurrent is like, yeah, of course, we are women, right? And especially in my artistic practice, that comes through quite a bit, not only maybe with the color palette that I use, but also the figures that I paint. And it obviously stems from a lot of personal experience. So I can't take that female element out of my work, or else it wouldn't be authentic to me. But we just have to do more and better as society to give female artists the recognition they deserve.
Yeah.
Are a lot of your students female as well?
I would say 75% of my students are women.
Yeah. See, that's one thing I've also noticed is even in art school and everything like that, it's majority women or like female identifying people who are in this career. So just to see that men are at the top, there's clearly that kind of divide, right?
Yeah. And it could be, a lot of women decide to, take a lot of time off to raise their kids.
Sure.
And there's obviously, there's imbalances in society, I think, that we have to correct. But some of it is personal choice and other parts are just social pressures, right?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, how do we account for or compensate for those social pressures in order to give more people equal opportunity, right?
I think it's about time we bring Lee in.
Ooh, can't wait to see.
Lee, do you want to make your way over?
Dun-dun.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Wow.
I really love it. I think you've done such a fantastic job.
Thank you.
How do you feel, Lee?
Because this one, the starting is not the most reassuring, but I do know it won't be that bad. I will eventually fix it. I know that. But then because there will be mid-checkpoint, so I was nervous to show the muddy beginning, especially instructor Robyn here.
I think you did me justice.
Yeah.
Thank
really
you.
Did.
Thanks.
I really like it.
Thank you. That's my time.
Yes. So fun.
Thank you, Robyn, so much for coming onto this episode.
Oh my God, thank you guys for having me. This was so fun to chat with you.
Of course. Would you like to share your socials, any events you have coming up?
So you can find me on Instagram at my name, just Robyn Asquini. Visit my website, robynasquini.com. I'm also on Facebook. So again, my name, Robyn Asquini. I do have a number of workshops coming up at the Academy of Realist Art. So if you are interested in signing up for one of those or reaching out to me about private teaching, feel free. And I can give you more information around both of those. So I'm exhibiting in a few places right now. You can find some of my work on Tacit Collective. I think the show is ending soon, but I'm not sure if it's going to be in time for, when this comes out. But I do have a piece at Crybaby Gallery now here in Toronto. You can find my work on Artsy as well through the James Baird Gallery and through Abend Gallery in Colorado. So yeah. And if you have any questions or, feel free to reach out to me. So
nice. Lots to look forward to.
Yeah,
definitely.
So busy.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, you can subscribe to this channel for more episodes. You can follow us on Instagram at clk.to or visit our website at clkco.ca. And yeah, thanks so much for watching this episode. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Oh, it was great.